They stand like ancient sentinels at the edge of forgotten forests, their bark like skin, weathered by countless seasons, their eyes holding memories of the First Age. But what secrets lie in the slow, rumbling hearts of the Ents? What ancient purpose brought these giants into being, and what cataclysmic events nearly drove them to extinction? The libraries of Gondor hold many secrets, but few as fascinating as the yellowed scrolls I discovered hidden behind newer volumes in Minas Tirith's 7th-level archives. Written in an archaic form of Sindarin, these records spoke of the earliest days of Middle-earth, when the Valar themselves still walked upon its soil. When the world was young and the first stars kindled, one passage read, Yavanna Kementari feared for the growing things of Arda, for in her vision she saw the children of Ilúvatar awakening, and with them came axes and fire. In her sorrow she knelt before Manwë and begged that the trees and plants might have guardians of their own. These guardians would become the Ents, the shepherds of the trees. Unlike elves or men, they were not children of Ilúvatar directly, but rather beings born from Yavanna's thought and given life through Eru's grace. They were created with a singular purpose: to protect the forests of Middle-earth from those who would harm them without thought or need. Among the most precious documents I uncovered was a fragment believed to be translated from the original Valarin records, describing the divine council that led to the Ents' creation. Aule had crafted the dwarves in secret, and though Ilúvatar had given them life of their own, Yavanna grew troubled. "My heart is anxious," she said to Manwë, Lord of the Air. "When the children awake, all other things shall be endangered. For the dwarves will delve in the earth, and the things that grow and live upon it they will not heed." And Manwë spoke to Ilúvatar of Yavanna's concerns, and from this council came the assurance that when the children awoke, so too would guardians for the trees awake. As the eagles were shepherds of the air, so would the Ents become shepherds of the forests. This origin story reveals something crucial about the Ents' place in the divine order of Middle-earth. They were not an afterthought, but a necessary balance to the children of Ilúvatar. Created specifically as a counterweight to the dwarves' mastery of stone and metal, the Ents embodied Yavanna's concern for growing things. This placed them in a unique position, not truly aligned with any one race, but rather with the forests themselves. Unlike the Elves, who were bound to Arda until the end of days, or men who would pass beyond the world, the Ents' fate was tied directly to the forests they protected. As the woods of Middle-earth flourished or diminished, so too would the fortunes of the Ents rise or fall. I journeyed north to the borders of what remained of Fangorn forest, seeking any who might remember the old stories. There I met Éowyn, a ranger whose grandfather had fought in the War of the Ring and claimed to have met Treebeard himself. My grandfather said their language was like the creaking of great boughs in winter, Éowyn told me, as we camped at the forest's edge. Not words as we understand them, but something deeper and older. He said that when an Ent spoke, you heard not just his voice, but the voices of countless trees echoing through him. This aligned with what I had read in the ancient records, that the Ents were given voice by Eru Ilúvatar himself, that they might speak for those who cannot speak. Their language, Entish, was said to be the oldest tongue in Middle-earth, save for Valarin itself, each word containing layers of meaning that might take hours to fully express. "In the speech of the Ents lies the memory of the world," wrote an elven scholar of the Second Age, "for they do not forget, and their words carry the weight of ages. To hear an Ent speak your name is to hear it echoed through the roots of time itself." The greatest tragedy in the long history of the Ents was undoubtedly the loss of the Entwives. In my search for their tale, I discovered a fragment of verse in Rivendell's abandoned library, written in Treebeard's own halting hand during the brief time he spent there after the War of the Ring. The Entwives tended gardens east of the great river, where now only dust and desolation grow. They taught men the secrets of seed and soil, but when darkness came, they could not stay beneath shadow. The Entwives, unlike their forest-dwelling counterparts, loved ordered growing things, the cultivated gardens, the tended orchards, the fields of grain. They settled in the lands that would later become the Brown Lands, north of Mordor, and taught the earliest men the arts of agriculture. But sometime in the Second Age, as Sauron's power grew, the Entwives and their gardens vanished. Some records suggest they were destroyed in the wars that ravaged those lands. Others hint that they may have fled beyond known borders, perhaps even crossing the Blue Mountains to the furthest west. A trader from Dale once told me of strange movements seen in distant fields at dusk. Tall figures that might have been trees, had trees been known to walk with purpose. But such tales are common in the north, and none have been confirmed. You know that the power of the Ents extended beyond merely tending to trees. The mysterious Ent-draughts, which gave Merry and Pippin their remarkable growth during the War of the Ring, were but one manifestation of their ancient abilities. In an account written by Legolas Greenleaf before he sailed west, he described something far more profound. Treebeard showed me the deepest groves of Fangorn, where the eldest Huorns dwell. These were not mere trees, nor were they fully Ents, but something in between, trees awakened to consciousness by long companionship with the shepherds. Some, he whispered, remembered the First Age and could move with terrible purpose when roused to anger. I felt their awareness like a weight upon my mind, ancient and patient and utterly alien to the thought of elves or men. The Huorns represented something profound, the ability of the Ents to impart a measure of their consciousness to the trees themselves. This suggests that the boundary between Ent and tree was never as fixed as most scholars assumed. It raises questions about the very nature of consciousness in Middle-earth and about what other secrets might lie dormant in the eldest forests. In my journeys through what remains of the old forest near the Shire, I encountered a woodsman who claimed his grandmother had witnessed the moving trees during the War of the Ring. Her description revealed a crucial distinction often overlooked in common tellings. The Huorns moved like a dark tide through the valleys, she had told him, but they were not Ents, though Ents walked among them, guiding their wrath. The Huorns had eyes of a sort, knotholes that gleamed with a red light when their anger was roused. They had no voices, only a whisper like wind through dead leaves, and they harbored a primal hatred for those who carried axes or lit fires carelessly. This account aligns with fragments I discovered in the archives of Minas Tirith, written by a scholar who had interviewed survivors of the Battle of the Hornburg. The distinction between Ent and Huorn is not merely one of appearance, but of nature. The Ents are shepherds, thinking, speaking beings who tend the forests as a shepherd tends his flock. The Huorns are their charges, trees that have absorbed something of the Ents' consciousness over centuries of care, becoming semi-aware and capable of movement, but lacking the full sentience of true Ents. They are more forest than folk, more instinct than intellect, and in their anger lies a terrible danger. This relationship, of shepherd to flock, explains much about both the Ents' purpose and their method. They did not merely protect the forests from outside harm, they actively cultivated consciousness within the trees themselves, creating guardians that could continue their work even when the Ents themselves were elsewhere. For millennia, the Ents retreated into the depths of their dwindling forests, becoming ever more tree-like, speaking less frequently, moving rarely. The outside world forgot them, relegating them to legend and children's tales. But the War of the Ring would reveal that their ancient power remained. I found an account from a Rohirrim warrior who witnessed the aftermath of the Ents' march on Isengard. We thought to find a fortress of stone defended by the wizard's arts. Instead, We found a lake where none had been before, and the great tower of Orthanc standing like an island in its midst. The very earth had been torn asunder, the stone walls crushed as if they were no more substantial than autumn leaves. And at the edges of this destruction stood figures like great trees, moving with slow purpose. I had thought the tales of tree giants mere stories to frighten children. I know better now. What the Rohirrim witnessed was the full might of the Ents unleashed for the first time since the Elder Days. In their wrath, they had diverted the river Isen, torn down walls that had stood for centuries, and destroyed Saruman's war machines with their bare hands. This was not magic as wizards or elves understood it, but something far older, the primal strength of the earth itself, channeled through beings designed to be its guardians. In that moment, the Ents revealed themselves as arguably the most physically powerful of all the free peoples of Middle-earth. Perhaps the most disturbing documents I uncovered in my research were fragmented records from late in the Second Age, suggesting a previously unknown chapter in the history of the Ents, their conflict with the Númenóreans during the height of that kingdom's power. A ship's log, preserved in the archives of Dol Amroth, contains this troubling passage. The captain ordered us to make landfall near the great forests south of Gwathlo, there to fell trees for the king's ships. The work proceeded well at first, but on the third day, strange sounds came from the depths of the forest, like the creaking of great boughs, but in patterns that seemed almost like speech. That night, 3 men disappeared. The next morning, we found the clearing where we had been working transformed. The stumps we had left were gone, the ground churned as if by massive roots. The captain ordered us back to the ships immediately. This account aligns with hints in other texts, suggesting that the Ents engaged in active resistance against the Númenórean deforestation efforts, particularly during the reign of Tar Aldarion, who established a great guild of adventurers that required vast amounts of timber for shipbuilding. A Númenórean court record refers obliquely to losses in the northern timber operations and debates about whether to send armed guards to protect the logging camps. Another fragment mentions trees that walk in the darkness and forests that reclaim their own. These conflicts may explain much about the diminishing of the Ents, not just the loss of the Entwives, but a series of direct confrontations with the powerful kingdom of Númenor at the height of its strength. Against axe and fire and the organized might of men, even the Ents would have suffered grievous losses, perhaps explaining why so few remained by the Third Age. While Fangorn Forest is most commonly associated with the Ents in the Third Age, my research uncovered evidence that their dominion once extended far beyond those borders. A map I found in Elrond's abandoned study showed symbols resembling stylized trees scattered across regions now known as Mirkwood, Lorien, and even the Old Forest near the Shire. Beside this map were notes in Elrond's hand. The realms of the Onodrim once spanned from the western shores to the inland sea of Rhûn, their domains more vast than any kingdom of elves or men. But as the shadow grew and the forests retreated, so too did the shepherds withdraw, concentrating their dwindling numbers where the need was greatest. This suggests that Ents once maintained a presence in nearly every major forest of Middle-earth, retreating gradually as their numbers diminished and the wooded lands they protected were cleared for human habitation. Most intriguing was a passage in the journals of Radagast the Brown, discovered among the effects he left behind when he vanished in the early Fourth Age. I have encountered signs of the tree shepherds even in the northernmost reaches of the Greenwood, far from Fangorn, where most believe them confined. They move rarely now and speak even less, but their work continues, though slower than the spreading of men. In the deepest groves, where even the elves rarely venture, I have heard their rumbling songs, passing secrets from root to root across hundreds of leagues. This raises the tantalizing possibility that even as the Ents physically withdrew to Fangorn, their influence continued to extend through root and branch throughout the connected forest systems of Middle-earth, a hidden network of awareness flowing beneath the soil itself. In my years of research into the creatures and races of Middle-earth, one aspect of the Ents stands apart from nearly all others: their singular originality. While elves, dwarves, dragons, and even wizards have analogues in various mythological traditions, the Ents appear to be entirely Tolkien's creation. I discovered a letter penned by the professor himself, in which he reflected on the genesis of these tree giants. I did not consciously invent them at all. The chapter called Treebeard, from Treebeard's first remark on page 66, was written off more or less as it stands, with an effect on myself, except for labor pains, almost like reading someone else's work. And I like Ents now, because they do not seem to have anything to do with me. I dare say something had been going on in the unconscious for some time, and that accounts for my feeling throughout, especially when stuck, that I was not inventing but reporting, imperfectly, and had at times to wait till what really happened came through. This remarkable confession suggests that the Ents emerged from some deep wellspring of Tolkien's imagination, not as a conscious borrowing or adaptation of existing myth, but as something that felt to their creator like a discovery rather than an invention. Perhaps this is why the Ents resonate so powerfully. They embody an archetypal concept, the spirit of the forest given form, that feels as if it should have always been part of our mythic lexicon, yet appears nowhere else in quite this form. They are simultaneously ancient and original, familiar and utterly unique. Yet for all their strength, the Ents were already fading when the Third Age drew to a close. Without the Entwives, no new Ents had been born for countless generations. Their numbers dwindled slowly, the survivors growing ever more tree-like with the passing centuries. In the Fourth Age, as the dominion of men spread across Middle-earth, the remaining Ents retreated deeper into the shrinking wilderness. The last reliable account of an Ent sighting comes from the reign of King Eldarion, son of Aragorn, when a group of hunters claimed to have seen a walking tree in the northern reaches of what remained of Fangorn. After that, silence. But have the Ents truly vanished from Middle-earth? Or have they simply withdrawn so completely into their tree nature that they can no longer be distinguished from the forests they once tended? An intriguing theory appears in the writings of Findargil, King's Writer of Gondor, in the early Fourth Age. It may be that the Ents have not died, but sleep. For they were made to endure as long as the trees themselves, and Yavanna's thought is not easily unmade. Perhaps they have simply slowed their speech and movement to match the patience of the eldest trees, taking a year to say, "Good morning," a decade to decide to move a limb. To mortal eyes, they would appear as nothing more than ancient, gnarled trees, their consciousness operating on a timescale beyond our comprehension. This possibility is both comforting and disquieting. It suggests that the ancient shepherds might still walk among us, their movements and thoughts so slow that generations of men might live and die in the time it takes an Ent to complete a single sentence. Whether the Ents still exist in some form or have passed entirely from the world, their legacy endures in the deep forests that remain in Middle-earth. The very existence of these wooded realms, standing against the relentless expansion of human civilization, may be their final gift to the world they were created to protect. The last words in my collection of Ent lore come from Peregrine Took, written in his old age. Treebeard once told me that Ents might fade, but they would never truly die until the last forest fell. "For we are the forest, little hobbit," he said, "and the forest is us. As long as trees grow toward the sun, something of the Ents remains in the world." I find that thought comforting somehow, especially on windy nights when the old trees around the smiles seem to whisper to each other in a language just beyond understanding. Perhaps that is the true secret of the Ents, that they were never fully separate from the woods they tended. Their consciousness, their purpose, their very essence remains diffused throughout the forests of Middle-earth, a silent sentinel against the day when the last trees might face destruction. And perhaps, if that day ever comes, the Ents will wake once more, rising from their long slumber to fulfill their ancient purpose as the shepherds of the trees. For as Treebeard himself said, some things that should not have been forgotten were lost. History became legend, legend became myth. But myths have power in Middle-earth, and the oldest myths most of all. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this type of content, don't forget to like and share your thoughts in the comments. See you in the next one.